There's a strange feeling that creeps in when you're standing in front of too many possibilities. You walk into a store looking for something simple, maybe just a pair of jeans or a bottle of shampoo, and suddenly you're staring at 50 different options. Different cuts, different shades, different promises printed on every label. And instead of feeling excited by all the choices, something else happens. Your mind starts to fog. Your confidence begins to drain. You stand there longer than you should, picking things up, putting them down, reading labels you don't fully understand, comparing features you're not sure even matter. And eventually, after all that mental effort, you either pick something randomly just to escape the decision, or you walk out with nothing at all, telling yourself you'll come back later when you have more time to think about it. Maybe you know this feeling. Maybe it's you. That paralysis that sets in not because you don't have enough options, but because you have too many. And what's fascinating is that this isn't just about shopping. It's about everything: careers, relationships, where to live, what to study, which opportunity to pursue, even what to watch on a streaming service with thousands of titles. We live in a world that has convinced us that more choices equal more freedom, more happiness, more control over our lives. But somewhere along the way, something went wrong. Because the more options we're given, the harder it becomes to choose anything at all. And even when we do finally choose, we're left with this nagging feeling that maybe we chose wrong, that maybe there was something better we missed, that maybe we should have spent more time comparing and analysing and thinking it through. This is what psychologists call the paradox of choice. The idea that having too many options doesn't liberate us. It paralyses us. It overwhelms us. And ultimately, it makes us less satisfied with whatever we end up choosing because we can't stop wondering about all the paths we didn't take. Let's go deeper into why this happens. For most of human history, people didn't have endless options. Your ancestors didn't walk into a marketplace with 300 types of bread. They didn't scroll through infinite potential partners on an app. They didn't agonise over which of 50 careers to pursue. Life was simpler in that way. Not easier, but simpler. You had a limited set of choices, and within those limitations, you made decisions and moved forward. There wasn't this constant background anxiety that maybe you were missing out on something better. But modern life has completely changed that equation. We're told that choice is power, that the ability to customize every aspect of our lives is progress, that having unlimited options means we can create the perfect life if we just choose wisely enough. And on the surface, that sounds wonderful. Who wouldn't want more control, more possibilities, more freedom to design their ideal existence? But here's what nobody warned us about. The human brain wasn't designed to process unlimited options. Psychologist Barry Schwartz, who studied this phenomenon extensively, discovered something crucial. When people are given too many choices, several things happen simultaneously. First, the decision-making process becomes exponentially more difficult because each additional option adds another layer of comparison, another variable to consider, another possibility to evaluate. Your brain has to work harder and harder to analyze all the potential outcomes. Second, the fear of making the wrong choice intensifies dramatically because with so many options available, the pressure to choose the optimal one becomes overwhelming. You start thinking that if you make the wrong choice, it's entirely your fault because you had every possible option available to you. And third, even after you finally make a choice, you experience less satisfaction because you can't stop thinking about all the alternatives you rejected, wondering if one of those would have been better. This is the paradox. More choices should theoretically lead to better outcomes and greater happiness. But in reality, more choices often lead to anxiety, regret, and a chronic sense of dissatisfaction. Because when you have 3 options, it's relatively easy to evaluate them and feel confident in your decision. But when you have 30 options, or 300, or 3,000, the cognitive load becomes crushing. You start second-guessing everything. You become hyper-aware of all the features and qualities you're trading off by choosing one thing over another. And your brain, which evolved to make quick survival decisions in environments with limited information, starts to short-circuit under the weight of too much information, too many variables, too many possible futures branching out from each choice. Think about how this plays out in real life. You're looking for a restaurant for dinner. 50 years ago, you might have had 3 or 4 options in your area. You'd pick one based on simple criteria like proximity, price, or what kind of food you were in the mood for, and that would be that. But now, you open an app and you're presented with hundreds of restaurants, each with reviews, ratings, photos, menus, price ranges, delivery times. You start scrolling, you read reviews, you compare ratings, you look at photos of the food, you check how long delivery will take. You wonder if you should try something new or stick with something familiar. 30 minutes pass and you still haven't decided. Your partner asks what you want and you say you don't know, you're still looking. Another 20 minutes pass. By now you're not even hungry anymore. You're just frustrated and tired, and you end up ordering from the same place you always order from, which makes you feel like you wasted almost an hour of your life staring at options you were never going to choose anyway. Or consider something bigger. Choosing a career path. Previous generations often followed relatively clear trajectories. You learned a trade, or you went into the family business, or you pursued one of a handful of professional paths that were available to people of your background and education level. The options were limited, which meant the decision was simpler. You weren't constantly wondering if you were living your best possible life because there weren't infinite alternative lives readily visible to compare yours against. But now, young people are told they can be anything, do anything, create any life they can imagine, which sounds empowering until you realise that it also means every path you don't choose feels like a failure, like you're closing doors, like you're somehow letting down the infinite potential that everyone keeps telling you exists within you. The same pattern shows up in relationships. Dating apps have created the illusion of unlimited romantic options. You can swipe through hundreds or thousands of potential partners, each one presenting a carefully curated version of themselves. And psychologically, this creates a terrible problem, because when you go on a date with someone, you're not just evaluating whether this person is good for you. You're unconsciously comparing them to all the other options you saw and to the idealized, perfect partner you've constructed in your mind from cherry-picking the best qualities of everyone you've encountered. So even when you meet someone genuinely wonderful, there's this nagging voice that whispers, "But what if there's someone even better? What if you're settling? What if the perfect person is just a few more swipes away?" And this prevents people from committing, from investing deeply in one person, because they're always aware that other options exist, that they could theoretically keep searching forever for someone who perfectly matches every item on their checklist. This is what happens when choice becomes overwhelming. It stops being about finding something good enough and starts being about finding something perfect. And perfect doesn't exist, which means you're trapped in an endless cycle of searching, comparing, second-guessing, and never feeling fully satisfied with whatever you choose because you can always imagine something better. Psychologists call this maximizing versus satisficing. Satisficers are people who have criteria for what they need, and once they find something that meets those criteria, they choose it and feel good about their decision. They're not looking for the absolute best option in the universe. They're looking for something good enough, and once they find it, they stop searching. Maximizers, on the other hand, are people who can't settle for good enough. They need the best possible option, which means they have to examine every alternative to make sure they're not missing something superior. And in a world of limitless options, maximizers are absolutely miserable. They spend enormous amounts of time and mental energy on every decision. They experience more regret after choosing because they can't stop thinking about the options they rejected. And they're less satisfied overall because there's always the possibility that somewhere out there is something slightly better that they missed. The cruel irony is that maximizers often end up with objectively better outcomes than satisficers. They do more research, they compare more options, they make more informed decisions, but they enjoy those outcomes less because the process of choosing was so exhausting and because they can't stop wondering if they could have done even better. So they end up with better results but lower happiness, which perfectly captures the paradox. More effort, more options, more information, and yet somehow less satisfaction, less peace, less confidence in the choices they make. And it's not just individual decisions that suffer. The paradox of choice affects how we view our entire lives. Social media has created a situation where you're constantly exposed to the highlight reels of thousands of other people's lives. Every day you see people who seem happier, more successful, more attractive, more adventurous, living in better places, having more interesting experiences. And even though you rationally know that you're seeing curated versions of reality, not the full truth of anyone's life, it's impossible not to compare. It's impossible not to feel like maybe you made wrong choices along the way. Like maybe if you'd chosen a different career, a different city, a different partner, a different path entirely, you'd be living one of those seemingly perfect lives you keep seeing. This constant exposure to alternative possibilities creates a chronic background anxiety about whether you're living the right life, whether you're making the right choices, whether you're somehow falling behind or missing out on the better version of your life that could have been. But here's what's important to understand. The problem isn't choice itself. Choice is genuinely valuable. Having some control over your life, having the ability to make decisions that align with your values and preferences, that's crucial for human well-being. The problem is excess choice. The problem is when the number of options crosses a threshold from helpful to harmful, from empowering to paralyzing, and that threshold is lower than most people think. Research suggests that people generally feel most satisfied when they have somewhere between 3 to 7 options to choose from. Enough variety to feel like they have meaningful choice, but not so many options that the decision becomes overwhelming. Beyond that sweet spot, additional options start creating diminishing returns, and eventually they create negative returns where more choices actually make people worse off. So what do you do with this information? How do you navigate a world that's designed to give you unlimited options when your brain can only handle a handful? The answer isn't to eliminate all choice. It's to deliberately create constraints. It's to recognize that limitations aren't always bad, that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to artificially reduce your options to a manageable number. This might mean deciding that you're only going to consider 3 job offers, or that you're only going to look at apartments in 2 neighborhoods, or that you're going to commit to watching the first show that looks interesting instead of spending an hour scrolling through options. It means recognizing that good enough is often actually better than optimal, because the process of finding optimal is so costly in terms of time, energy, and peace of mind that it outweighs whatever marginal benefit you might get from the perfect choice. It also means accepting that every choice involves trade-offs, and that's okay. When you choose one path, you're necessarily not choosing other paths, and that doesn't mean you made a mistake. It means you made a decision, which is what living requires. You can't simultaneously explore every possibility. You can't live every potential version of your life. At some point, you have to commit to something, even knowing that other options existed, even accepting that you'll never know for certain if you made the absolute best choice. And counterintuitively, that commitment, that acceptance of limitation, is often what finally allows you to find satisfaction and peace. Music. Because here's the deeper truth that the paradox of choice reveals. freedom isn't actually about having unlimited options. Real freedom is about having the clarity and confidence to choose something and then fully invest in that choice without constantly looking back at what you didn't choose. It's about trusting that you made a reasonable decision with the information you had and then committing to making that choice work rather than endlessly second-guessing yourself. The happiest people aren't the ones with the most options. They're the ones who can make decisions, accept them, and move forward without being haunted by all the paths they didn't take. They're the ones who understand that perfect doesn't exist, that every choice involves giving something up, and that the goal isn't to avoid ever making a wrong choice but to make choices, and then live with them fully, learning and adjusting as you go. So maybe the real lesson here is this. In a world that offers you unlimited everything, the most powerful thing you can do is limit yourself. Choose your constraints. Decide what actually matters to you and ignore the rest. Stop trying to optimize every decision. Stop comparing your life to every alternative you can imagine. Make choices that are good enough, commit to them, and then focus your energy on making the most of what you chose rather than wondering about what you didn't. Because paralysis isn't freedom. Clarity is freedom. And sometimes the path to clarity is accepting that less really can be more.